Hello. Let's go ahead and review some items about equations of a circle and make sure that we are nice and prepared for our test on this information. So number one, we're going to write the equation of a circle where I know the center at negative 3, 5, and my circle contains the point at negative 11, comma 20. So for this, I do know the center, but I'm going to need to know the radius, so we'll use the distance formula in order to find that. So remember, we're going to do our x values. That's a negative 3 minus the negative 11 quantity squared plus the 5 minus 20 quantity for our y's. That gets squared. So we will be thinking about then, let's see, negative 3 plus 11 is what my brain has to focus on with the double signs. So that's going to be looking at an 8 squared plus, then my 5 minus 20 would give us a negative 15 squared. So that 8 squared is a 64, negative 15 squared is a 225. We'll go ahead and add both of those together. And you're talking about the square root of 289. That is a perfect square, so the radius here must be 17. We go ahead and use that now to make the equation. So this is going to be x plus 3 quantity squared. Remember, in the binomial, it's always the opposite sign of what your center has. Then we add on the y minus 5 quantity squared and set this equal to our r squared value. That is going to be 17 squared, gives us 289. Next up, as we go down the page to number 2, wants us to identify the radius of our circle. Well, remember, radius comes from that value that stands alone. This is my r squared. So if r squared is equal to 529, I need to take the square root on both sides now to isolate that. So my radius must be 23. Down below here, number 3 says determine the center of the circle from this equation. I can't do that when I'm not in standard form. I recognize standard form as having those two sets of parentheses for me. So we need to complete the square for this. So we're going to make sure that all of our variables are on one side and move all of our constants over to the right. So I have to add 11 to both sides. 0 plus 11 then makes it 11. Then remember, we're going to need to group our x's together, rearrange a little bit. X squared minus 16x, and we'll leave some space for it, plus y squared plus 10y, and we'll leave some space for it. This is still equal to 11. So we have to pick out those values now to complete the square. So I'm going to think about that b value of negative 16 divided by 2. That gives me a negative 8. Square it, and that's a plus 64. Remember, what you add to one side, you have to add to the other side. I can also go ahead and factor that value out. So my x comes along. And remember, that other value that you fill in is whatever you had inside of the parentheses. That negative 16 over 2 gives us the negative 8 to fill in with. That gets squared. Then I'll take my y grouping and got to figure that out. Here I am thinking about my b value as a positive 10 divided by 2, and that gets squared. So this is going to be a 5 squared is positive 25. We know what we add to one side, we have to add to the other side. And I'll get that binomial factored as well. So my y squared comes on down. And the other value in there is the b divided by 2. That plus 10, positive 10 divided by 2, puts it at a positive 5. And so don't lose my plus sign that was in between those values. And on the other side, we're setting up 11 plus 64 plus 25. This is equal to 100. So the question asked us to determine the center of the circle. My center now that we're in standard form, I can pull from the h and k values. We're talking a positive 8 and a negative 5 because that center always uses the opposite signs. Lastly, your number 4 wanted the equation for the circle that we have shown here. So I got to figure out what is the center point of my circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, comma, negative 3. and figure out what the radius is as well. Make sure you count on a horizontal or vertical grid line. 1, 2, 3, 4 for us there. And put that together into your equation now. X minus 6 quantity squared plus y plus 3 quantity squared equals, and then we do the radius squared. 4 squared puts us at 16. I hope that this helps you feel so much more confident and refreshed about everything for equations of circles. Have an awesome day.